Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Welcome to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello, everybody. How is it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. I am from Canada, if I have not mentioned that before. So this weekend was Thanksgiving weekend for me. So I was able to have dinner with my family, which was really awesome. Catch up. I love Thanksgiving. I love the yummy food. I love just being able to hang out with my family, catch up, talk about things that we're thankful for, just be grateful to be together. So I had a really awesome weekend, I guess is what I really wanted to say. So I'm super happy to be back here to share more feel-good, positive stories with you. This weekend just reminded me that there are so many amazing things going on. There's so many amazing things that life brings us, and kindness and, just those small random acts can really make a huge difference in so many people's lives. And despite how crazy 2020 has been, there has still been so many amazing things. And I get to share all those stories with you every single week. And that's just so exciting for me. I'm super grateful that I get to do that. So I'm going to stop rambling on about how grateful and thankful and happy I am to be here, and I will just get going on. I have so many good stories, like I do every episode, I say that, but I seriously do. I have so many powerful stories, some new inventions, just some inspiring, powerful, heart-wrenching stories today. So I'm going to jump right into it. Well, since, of course, there is the COVID-19 pandemic, a new generation of young poll workers is now stepping up to the plate to protect the elderly from COVID-19. So during normal election years, it's typical that retired people kind of step up in to act as poll workers, but many Americans are staying home right now. The elderly Americans are staying home to protect themselves from COVID-19. So the youth has, stepped up to take the reins of this civic responsibility and protect our elderly and do what they have to do for the poll workers. So far, there has been 450,000 recruited youth of the next generation poll workers, and that is 200,000 above the original target of 250,000. So that's pretty cool. So the majority of people that are signing up are between the ages 18 to 35 years old, whereas before more than 70% were usually about 60 to 70 years of age. So along with age comes, of course, an increased susceptibility to the coronavirus. So in the states like Alaska, 95% of the previous volunteers declined to participate this year, that's a lot, 95%, but it makes sense. So the Power the Polls is this organization that is basically recruiting all of the youth volunteers, associations, and the corporations just to ensure that these poll workers have access to personal protective equipment, training, and pay in some of the cases as well. And they're also relied on their corporate partners for recruitment and their willingness to give their workers paid time off or try and recruit poll workers from among their own staff. So, civil associations like the AARP and the Association of Young Americans have also been involved in this process, and they have helped educate voters about the need for poll workers and in helping ensure that once they do sign up, they show up to the job. So they say there is a need for us to sound the alarm, and that's why we're working intergenerationally with other folks. So that was John Hishta, the AARP's senior vice president of campaigns. And the Fast Company details all the things in a volunteer poll worker station is responsible for. So tidying up, helping people who have trouble with the situation, as well as just keeping the machines functional and reporting polling data. So this year they will also be working with PPE equipment, right, the entire time. So making sure that they're sanitizing and operating the space correctly and helping people maintain safe social distancing practices. But I wanted to share this story for a little celebration to the youth that have stepped up to the plate to ensure that our elderly stay safe at this time. Now, this next story I have to share with you is super inspiring. I think this is so cool. So there was this Greek athlete, and he carried a disabled woman up Mount Olympus because it was her lifelong dream. How incredible is that? Okay, so his name is Marios Ginoko. I hope I'm saying that right. He is a long distance runner, and he has quite the track record of taking on some challenges. He actually trekked 168 miles across the El Morome Desert, and he took first place in a frigid 93-mile cross-country race in Antarctica before. So prior to his latest endeavor, he's actually already successfully taken in the view from the top of Mount Olympus, the highest peak. He's done this 50 times. So when he met he befriended this 22-year-old biology student. Her name is Alfira Tosso, and he learned that one of her dreams was to experience the summit herself. But I guess to him, it seemed only natural that he was more than ready to rise to the occasion, the challenge, and get her to the top of Mount Olympus. So he says, for me, all international races, the medals, and the distinctions so far mean little compared to this goal. So they securely harnessed her in a specifically modified backpack, and him, along with 8 other members of a support team, started to just gruel up the ascent of Mount Olympus' tallest peak. So it's called Mount Mitakas. And when they reached 2,400 meters, they stopped to rest, but after making camp for the night, and then they resumed their climb at 6 a.m. the following morning. So then 3 hours later, it was about 9:02 local time, and they put about 10 hours of climbing in, and they reached their 2,918 meter summit. And she says there's nothing more real than the dream. It's heartening to know that while we generally think of heroes as the stuff of myth and legend, there are actually some shining examples, like Marios Ginoko, who exist in real life as well. A real life hero. How cool is that? That is just so incredible to carry this woman on his back all the way up that mountain. Like, that is the most incredible act of kindness I have heard in such a long time. So I wanted to share that with you. So my next story for you is if you may be a little bit scared of, if you're dreading a dark winter lockdown, this new information has come out that we need to start thinking like a Norwegian. Like winter months come, right? It's gloomy, the sunshine is reduced, and a lot of people get affected by seasonal affective disorder, where you just feel a little bit more down in the dumps because of the weather, the darkness. It's just the winter blues, right? And since, of course, we are also still going through a pandemic, a lockdown during this time could be quite scary and very dreadful for a lot of people. So this information came out that we need to start thinking like the Norwegians, because they, I guess, have a mindset that is always staying positive. So Carrie LaBoots is an American psychologist who was studying the Norwegians' attitudes toward their long, sunless winters above the Arctic Circle. So they have to deal with the long, dark winters all the time, right? So residing in the Norwegian town of Tremoso, she observed how the people there tended to view the winter as a challenge, or even more often like an opportunity, and an act of reframing that resulted in the residents scoring higher on this wintertime mindset scale that they put out there. So they're saying that there are many things to enjoy about the winter, and I love the coziness of the winter months. Winter brings many wonderful seasonal changes. And then there's others that say winter is boring, winter is a limiting time of year, and there are many things to dislike about winter. So the answers that came from these questions were found to predict that the mental well-being of the answerer over the following months, with many of Toronto's residents struggling to imagine why a person might not be excited for winter, while listing things like hiking, skiing, and curling up in front of a fire with a hot drink as things that they were looking forward to. So, with her research was the subject of this article in The Guardian that I was reading, and it was regarding how people might react to the news of future second lockdowns. So according to the New Jersey-born health psychologist, she says a person's reaction to winter is similar to a person's reaction to waking up early. It's something they're just not born to do, saying, I'm just not a morning person. So most people don't realize that their beliefs about winter are subjective. They feel like they're just someone who hates the winter and there's nothing they can do about it. But once you put it in people's heads that mindsets exist and that you have control over your mindset, then that is tremendously helpful. So she says that the proactive framing towards a second set of lockdowns could start with positive things similar to how the wintertime mindset scale looks. So saying things like, I've already done a lockdown, I can do a second one. Or this is the perfect time for bracing hike through the snow as a socially distanced social activity. So another one of Norway's unique culture mindsets is the free air of life. And it's quite useful for another set of lockdowns, especially if they arrive during the winter months, which, many Norwegians recognize as a lockdown on its own. So they're saying that in this article, this free air life is, those are activities that include relaxing, fishing, hiking, sleeping in camping hammocks, I guess, not tents, and picking up cloudberries. So its symbol is the campfire and its mantra is man's right to roam. So they're saying kind of live in that free air life to make the most of what you can of the winter months, of the lockdown, and think like a Norwegian. So there you have it. If you're scared of some winter blues lockdowns, we got to start having a mindset like the Norwegians. Now it's time for a little bit of a break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back, I've got lots more feel-good, positive stories to share with you, so stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast. I'm back sharing all more feel-good, positive stories with you, so I'll jump right back into it. My next story is about baby sea turtles. I have a very soft spot in my heart for turtles in general. I actually have a pet tortoise. And so when I read this article about saving endangered baby sea turtles, I just had to share it with you because it just always hits home for me. So scientists have discovered a new way to save endangered baby sea turtles, and it's by using GPS. How interesting is that? So by placing 3D printed and GPS enabled decoy sea turtle eggs into nests on the beach, it could be the possible way to gather key evidence needed to expose illegal trade of the eggs. So this is a finding in this new study. It was just published in the Journal of Current Biology, and it is according to the release from Cell Press. So these researchers specifically tested how well the decoy eggs work and their safety for the endangered turtles. So they say, our research showed that placing a decoy into a turtle nest did not damage the incubating embryos and that the decoys do work. And they say that we showed that it was possible to track illegal removed eggs from beach to end consumer, as shown by our longest track, which identified the entire trade chain covering 137 kilometers. So the egg decoys that are being called investigator Sorry, it cracks me up. Investigator. So they were developed by the conservation organization Paso Pacifico to address the illegal trade of endangered sea turtles in Central America, where the eggs are smuggled usually from beaches and sold to restaurants and bars as a delicacy. So, Paso Pacifico affiliated scientist Kim Williams-Gulen, who conceived and designed the decoys in response to a call for proposals from the United States Agency for International Development and Wildlife Crime Tech Challenge. She says that they were looking for a project using technological advances to fight wildfire poaching. So the idea was kind of like an aha moment. She says it immediately brought to the mind of her two favorite shows, Breaking Bad and The Wire, which both happen to deal with illegal drug trafficking. So she says, in Breaking Bad, the DEA places a GPS tracking device on a tank of chemicals to see who receives the chemicals. In one episode of The Wire, 2 police officers plant an audio device in tennis ball to surreptitiously record a suspected drug dealer. So turtle eggs basically look like ping pong balls, and we wanted to know where they were going and put those two ideas together, and you have the investigator. Every time. I'm going to giggle every time. So to see how well they worked in the practice, her and her colleagues put the 3D printed decoys in 101 turtle nests on 4 beaches in Costa Rica. And a quarter of the fake eggs were taken illegally from the nest, allowing the researchers to track eggs from 5 clutches, including 2 green turtle nests and 3 olive ridley nests. And one of the decoys made it close to a residential property before going silent. Another went 2 kilometers to a bar. The one that went furthest ended up 137 kilometers inland, spending 2 days in transit from the beach to a supermarket, loading bay, and then onto a residential property. And the researchers assumed that the egg wasn't sold at the market, but was rather handed off there from a trafficker to a salesperson. So they also got some anecdotal reports of cases where someone discovered the decoy. One decoy went offline in a residential area near Kalari, which is a town 43 kilometers from the deployment beach. And after 11 days, they received photographs sent from the town of the dissected egg. And along with the photos, they also got information about where the egg was purchased and how many eggs had been exchanged. So the findings show that the decoy eggs already are yielding intelligence from the local community in addition to tracking data. And they say that their early evidence shows that the majority of stolen eggs don't leave the local area. The finding reaffirmed their suspicions, as well as some local reports that most of the trade takes place close to the nesting beach, knowing that a high proportion of eggs remain in the local area helps us target our conservation efforts. So now they say that we can now focus our efforts on raising awareness in local communities and direct law enforcement to this local issue. It also means we know where the consumers are, which assists us in focusing demand reduction campaigns. And the key thing isn't to find the people who take the eggs from the beach. But to a large extent, because that's already known, from a law enforcement perspective, the critical thing is to identify those who are trafficking and selling the eggs, often door to door. So as trafficking is a more serious crime, those handover points are far more valuable from a law enforcement perspective than catching someone taking a nest. So that's what makes this investigator as such an important tool. So they says that it really must be used in the context of a multi-pronged conservation approach that uses education, building better economic opportunities, and enforcement to help fight sea turtles' egg poaching. So the research, they also say that they see more turtle projects use the decoys on their nesting beach, and these efforts could shed light on differences in the turtle egg trade in different countries as well. So they're going to continue to improve the technology and its deployment, and they're also interested in expanding the technology to other species, for example. So Paso Pacifico plans to work with Costa Rican scientists to adapt the transmitter for use in tracking shipments of shark fins, and they're also considering it using in tracking the theft of eggs from parrot nests. So I guess more information to come about the investigator. I love that so much. Now, my next story for you is a positive story about COVID-19. You know, I can't do an episode without at least one positive story about the pandemic, and this story is so cool. A woman raised $85,000 for COVID-19 relief by climbing all 58 of Colorado's 14,000 feet mountains. Yes, 14,000 feet mountains, 58 of them, but she raised $85,000 for COVID-19 relief. So she's a 27-year-old University of Denver grad student. Her name is Brittany Woodrum, and she decided that she wanted to make a difference. She goes by the nickname Bert, I guess, and she's working towards her master's degree in humanitarian assistance after focusing on nonprofit administration and Spanish as an undergrad at the University of Kentucky. So she has a long history of working with nonprofit NGOs to help at-risk and marginalized populations under her belt. So she cites her experience living at a Buddhist nunnery in Myanmar while helping to launch a language program with shaping her worldview. She says, the nuns taught me a lot about the idea of impermanence. With a desire to learn more, I eagerly dove into their way of life, shaving my hair and donating nearly everything I owned. These women had nothing compared to the life I was used to, yet their lives were overflowing with joy and purpose. So in addition to her humanitarian efforts, she's an avid outdoors woman and a hiker, and she faced with, of course, enforced time off. She started to look for an organization to hook her up with, that would allow her to combine her two passions. So Shelter Box was the perfect solution for this. She says no one should have to worry about where their shelter will come from, and that's why I was really struck to Shelter Box's mission. So known for its trademark, it's a turquoise box filled with essential relief items. Shelter Box is a global organization made up of people who believe in a shelter as a human right, and that shelter from the chaos of disaster and conflict is vital. So, a total of 58 peaks with elevations of 14,000 feet or more are considered some of the toughest climbing destinations in North America. And she decided to take on all of them one at a time with the goal of raising and funding this awareness for families who lost everything as a result of the global pandemic. So, with all this taking place, she always had her trusty 14-pound blue box on her back, and she would continue to hike up these mountains and raise awareness and money. So it took her 78 days. But after summiting her last peak, called Cresto Needle, on September 26, she raised nearly $85,000. How cool is that? So the word seemed to spread very quickly, and a lot of people were equally impassioned by Shelter Box's mission and what I was doing. She says, I have an immense amount of gratitude to everyone who came out to support me both virtually and physically. While the extended outdoor took its toll on her, she spent some nights camping out in her car, avoided grocery shopping as much as possible, and at the end of the day, she couldn't have asked for a better outcome. So with her mission accomplished, she says that she plans to take a little well-deserved downtime, but she doesn't plan to rest for very long. She says, I feel very privileged with everything I have ever had. The best thing I can do with my life is to pay some of that forward and help others who, by no fault of their own, have had the worst day or year of their life. That is a lot of hiking, but such an inspiring story. Well, it's time for another break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back, I've got a few more feel-good, positive stories to share with you to round off today's episode, including the first ever green shopping aisle, okay? Now, this caters to environmental enthusiasts who want home DIY projects. If that sounds exciting to you, which I know a lot of us are doing some DIY projects right now, stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this story.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast. Hello, I'm your host, Alyssa Jo. We're on the last stretch of today's episode. Welcome back. Okay, so my next story for you is about a pretty cool invention. It's called smell by labels, and they can help you cut kitchen waste and know when your food has actually gone bad. So this has been basically just invented to help people know whether your food has actually gone bad or if it's still good to consume. So I know we usually look at like a best before date, right? To try to tell, if we can actually eat that food or not, if it's safe to eat. But, they actually don't really tell you whether your food is safe to eat or not, these best before labels, right? So according to this new statement from the mobile app Too Good To Go, a third of Brits rely solely on best before labels when deciding whether their food has gone bad. But the problem with this is that these dates are indicators of quality, not safety. So they're only there to tell you when your bread will be at its softest and your lettuce leaves will be at its crunchiest. But in other words, that means that we're throwing away thousands of tons of perfectly edible, delicious food, all because of this label that we think, it's just it wasn't quite as fresh as it once was, but it is still safe to eat. So Too Good To Go came up with this idea by smell by labels. So covering off 4 commonly wasted products, so oats, orange juice, eggs, and beer, these scratch and sniff sticker labels will train your nose to know exactly what your food would smell like if it was really no longer okay to eat. So basically, this is to help us all get back in touch with our common sense, trusting our senses to do their job and alert us if we're hovering near something we shouldn't be eating. So Too Good To Go teamed up with the world's first professional smellier, they like to call it, Delish Alveu, whose nostril superpowers were deployed to help prove when these foods are still good to go. So Too Good To Go is planning to work with these retailers in future to help the stickers reach labeling on all of your packages. But now you can order them from their website if you are more curious about this. And it's basically like scratch and sniff stickers, and it's like a scratch and sniff thing, and you can tell if your food has gone bad, if it's safe to eat, or to kind of like what kind of quality it's at. So you can just go toogoodtogo.co.uk and go onto their website. You can order them right on their website. You can also, there's a video about them, talks a little bit more, explains kind of the science behind it, I guess, and how exactly it works. So if you want more information or you want to go order your own scratch and sniff labels, head on over to the Too Good To Go website. Now, I mentioned before the break about the first ever green shopping aisle. It caters to environmental enthusiasts who want home DIY projects. So these, environmentally minded DIY enthusiasts can now enjoy the first ever green shopping aisle. It's complete with a real grass walkway and a canopy infused with foliage and butterflies. It is so cool. So the green aisle is quite literally with evergreen climbers and vegetation to help eco-conscious shoppers find the section of the hardware store that will make their home more sustainable. So the green aisle launches at one of Britain's major hardware chains, and it's called Homebase. So the first stores to get the foliage festoon aisles are in London, let's see here, Birmingham and Leeds, with more stores to follow soon. So this is in partnership with Smart Energy GB, and the aisle showcases eco-friendly and energy-efficient home improvement products, as well as information on how to get a smarter meter installed all in one place. And all of these efforts will help make homes greener and ready for the winter. So the green aisle was created after research found 74% of Brits are keen to make their home greener, but half have no idea where to start. So, Craig Phillips, he is a DIY expert and one of the first to visit the green aisle in Britain. He says, "I've helped hundreds of people improve their homes over the years by making small changes which have a big impact. The same is true for taking small energy efficiency measures in the home. It can be hard to know where to start and when it comes to making greener choices. But the green aisle helps make this process even easier for people by identifying which products are more environmentally friendly and likewise understand the positive impact they can have." So, data from the Energy Saving Trust also shows that this household can save up to $751 on energy bills each year if they implement a full range of efficiency measures. That's a lot of money. So these include the purchases of like efficient appliances, exercising best practice energy saving behavior, which can be encouraged with a smart meter. On top of the financial savings, a household could also save about 2,141 kilogram of CO2 emissions, which is equivalent of driving 7,500 miles or enough energy to power the lights in 27 homes in the UK for a year. So whether you're looking for a water-saving shower faucet, eco-friendly plant, a smart meter, or just like a drought excluder for your door, if you are in Britain, you can now go to the green aisle to go and get all of this stuff that you need for your house. I think this is such a cool concept. Now, my next story for you is about the very iconic Tasmanian Devil, okay? The Tasmanian Devil, after 3,000 years, has made a comeback on mainland Australia. 3,000 years for the first time. So the first historic release is only step one in the mission to rewild Australia and bring balance to the bush. But according to this nonprofit called Aussie Ark and its partners Global Wildlife Conservation and Wild Ark, they are saying that Aussie Ark explained they are committed to returning Australia's ecosystems to that pre-European settlement, free from introduced feral predators, and basically make it an island oasis. So, to date, there are more than 390 Tasmanian devils have been born and raised at Aussie Ark in a way that fosters natural behavior in the animals, preparing them for release into the wild. And this year, 26 Tasmanian devils were released into a 400-hectare wild sanctuary. And then the next 2 years, the Aussie Ark plans 2 additional releases of 20 devils each. If all goes as planned, the animals will breed and produce joeys, eventually resulting in a self-sustaining wild population. So not only does the reintroduction bode well for the recovery of the Tasmanian devil, but as native apex predators and the world's largest carnivores, they help control feral cats and foxes that threaten other endangered and endemic species. And as scavengers, they help keep their home clean and free of diseases. So their return to the wild therefore established the foundation for an ambitious vision to rewild Australia. So Tasmanian devils vanished entirely from mainland Australia in large part because they were out-competited by introduced dingoes, which hunt in packs. So the Tasmanian devils survived only on the island of Tasmania, where the dingoes never reached. So across the island state, a transmissible, painful, and fatal disease called devil facial tumor disease, DFTD, the only known contagious cancer, it decimated up to 90% of the wild population of Tasmanian devils. So just 25,000 devils are left in the wild of Tasmania today. So the animals Aussie Ark has released will be monitored through regular surveys, radio collars fit with transmitters, and camera traps. So they're keeping quite a close eye on these Tasmanian devils. And this will give the researchers the opportunity to learn about how the devils are faring, where they are claiming their territory, what challenges they are facing, what they are eating, and whether they are reproducing. So all this information will help inform future releases, including in Tasmania and elsewhere on the mainland, to continually refine the process. So you can actually donate today for Australia's Wildlife Tomorrow, and you can just head to aussieark.com if you want to help out the beautiful, wonderful, crazy Tasmanian devils get back to wild Australia. All right, well, that is all that I have to share with you today. Thank you so much for listening to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I had so much fun sharing this information with you today and all these fun stories. Thank you for being here. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button. I've got new episodes out every single Monday and Thursday, as well else, head over to our social media pages. I update those regularly. You can see what's coming up for the next episode. I would love to engage and chat with you. As always, too, do not forget to leave a 5-star review. It means the world to me. It means so much. I love reading them, and it just takes a few seconds out of your day. So thank you so much for being here. Stay happy, stay positive, and spread kindness every single chance that you get. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.